In the depths of space, where stars are born and die across eons that dwarf human comprehension, there exist places where time itself seems to hold its breath. Worlds where the dust that settles on ancient stone has witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Planets that were old when humanity's ancestors first looked up at the night sky and wondered what lay beyond. These are the tomb worlds of the Necrons, scattered across the galaxy like forgotten monuments to an empire that once ruled the stars with absolute dominion. On one such world, a planet designated in imperial records as Mortis Septimus, but known to its ancient inhabitants by a name in a language that predates the Gothic tongue by 60 million years, something stirs in the darkness. Deep beneath layers of stone and metal, past chambers that have not felt the tread of living feet since before the first mammals walked terra, systems that have slumbered for longer than human recorded history begin to flicker back to life. The awakening of a tomb world is not a sudden thing. It does not happen with dramatic flourish or thunderous declaration. Instead, it unfolds with the patience of geological time, each step calculated and measured by machine intelligences that operate on scales incomprehensible to shorter-lived species. First come the preliminary scans, automated systems probing the surface world above, testing the composition of the atmosphere, measuring the strength of the stellar winds, cataloging every electromagnetic signal that whispers across the void. Then the deeper protocols engage. Power begins to flow through conduits that have lain dormant, living metal that composes the tomb's infrastructure, responding to ancient programming with the reliability of fundamental physics. Scarabs, tiny repair constructs no larger than a human hand, begin their endless work of maintenance and restoration. They move through the darkness like schools of metallic fish, their emerald optical sensors casting eerie light across surfaces untouched for millennia. The canoptek constructs are next, larger machines designed for more substantial tasks. Wraiths phase in and out of reality as they patrol the tomb's perimeter, their dimensional destabilization matrices allowing them to slip through solid matter as easily as a human might walk through fog. Tombstalkers burrow through the stone, extending the tomb's sensor network deeper into the planetary crust, searching for threats, cataloging resources, preparing the way for what is to come. In a chamber deep within the tomb complex, a chamber whose dimensions seem to shift and flow in ways that hurt to perceive, something unusual catches the attention of the automated systems. An anomaly, a presence that should not exist. The tomb's machine mind, an artificial intelligence of staggering complexity that makes the most advanced imperial cogitators look like children's toys, begins directing resources toward this curiosity. More scarabs are dispatched. More comprehensive scans are initiated. Data streams through quantum-encrypted channels, analyzed and cross-referenced against databases that contain the accumulated knowledge of a civilization that conquered the galaxy before humanity's sun had finished forming. What the tomb has found is not Necron in origin. That much is immediately clear. The electromagnetic signature is all wrong, the material composition foreign, the energy readings utterly inconsistent with Necron technology, and yet, there is something about it that resonates with the tomb's deeper programming, something that speaks to concepts the Necrons know all too well. Preservation, stasis, the suspension of a living being in a state between life and death, held in mechanical embrace against the passage of time. The tomb has discovered a Dreadnought. To understand the significance of this discovery, one must first comprehend what the Necrons truly are. They are not merely robots, not simple automatons of metal and wire. They are beings who made a choice. Though whether it can truly be called a choice when desperation and deception were involved remains a question debated even among their own kind. They were once the Necron Tyre, a species of flesh and blood who lived short, pain-filled lives beneath the radiation of dying stars. Their civilization was a marvel of technological achievement, but their bodies were frail things, ravaged by cancers and mutations. Their lifespans measured in mere decades where other species enjoyed centuries or millennia. in their desperation to escape this curse, in their burning envy of the old ones who possessed the secrets of immortality, the Necrontyr made a bargain with beings of terrible power. The Satan, star gods who fed upon the very essence of reality itself, offered them a solution. Biotransference, they called it. The transfer of consciousness from failing flesh into bodies of living metal, necrodermis that could repair itself, that would never age, never sicken, never die. What the Satan did not tell them, or what they did tell them, but the Necrontyr were too desperate to hear, was the price of this transformation. For in the moment of transfer, something essential was lost. The Necrons emerged from the great furnaces as immortal beings, yes, but they had left their souls behind. The lower castes lost almost everything, becoming little more than automatons, shambling warriors with barely a flicker of the people they had once been. Even the nobility, given the finest necrodermis bodies capable of retaining greater personality and memory, found themselves changed in fundamental ways. Emotions became muted, distant things. The capacity for empathy, for true feeling, was diminished or lost entirely. They had achieved immortality, but at the cost of everything that made existence worth living. They had become eternal, but hollow, undying, but in a very real sense, already dead. And yet, they endured. They fought in the war in heaven, a conflict so vast and terrible that its echoes still ripple across the galaxy 60 million years later. They helped bring low the old ones, those ancient beings who had refused to share their secrets. They even turned on the Satan themselves, shattering their star godmasters into fragments and binding those shards as weapons and power sources. But the war had cost them dearly. The galaxy was in ruins. New species were rising to fill the void left by the old ones' defeat, and the Necrons themselves were broken, scattered, diminished. So they made another choice. They would sleep. They would retreat to their tomb worlds, seal themselves in stasis, and wait. Wait for the galaxy to heal. Wait for the newer, younger species to weaken themselves through conflict. Wait for the right moment to reclaim what had once been theirs. And so they slumbered for 60 million years, while empires rose and fell above them, while humanity crawled out of its cradle and spread across the stars, while the Aeldari built a civilization that spanned the galaxy only to destroy it through their own excess. Now, in the 41st millennium, they are waking. Not all at once, not in perfect coordination, but in fits and starts. Tomb worlds coming online across the galaxy as their programmed awakening protocols, trigger or external stimuli, rouses them from their long sleep. And as they wake, they find a galaxy much changed from the one they left behind, but also, in some ways, disturbingly familiar. For the younger races, in their struggles to survive in this grim darkness, have developed their own methods of cheating death, their own ways of preserving warriors beyond their natural span. The Dreadnought is one such method. In the arsenal of the Adeptus Astartes, the space marines who serve as humanity's greatest warriors, there are many weapons of war. Bolters that fire explosive rounds capable of blowing apart a human torso, power weapons that disrupt matter at the molecular level, massive battle tanks and sleek aircraft. But perhaps the most tragic, and in some ways the most powerful weapon in a chapter's inventory is the Dreadnought. For unlike other weapons, a Dreadnought is not merely a tool, it is a tomb. A walking sarcophagus, a prison and a preservation device all in one. When a space marine suffers wounds so catastrophic that even their enhanced physiology and the skill of the chapter's apothecaries cannot save them, but their spirit burns too bright to let die, they are given what some call an honor and others know to be a curse. Their broken body is removed from its power armor and placed within an armored sarcophagus. This sarcophagus is then integrated into a massive bipedal war machine, typically between 3 and 5 meters tall, armed with weapons that would normally require a vehicle to carry. The Marine's nervous system is linked to the Dreadnought systems through a mind impulse unit. allowing them to control the mechanical body as they once controlled their flesh and bone. In this state, they can continue to serve the Emperor and their chapter. They can stride into battle, bringing the weight of their experience and the firepower of their weapons platforms to bear against the enemies of humanity. They are revered by their brothers, treated as living relics, sources of wisdom and inspiration. They are the ancients, the venerable ones, warriors who have served for centuries or even millennia beyond their natural lifespan. But there is a cost, as there always is. The sensory feedback from the Dreadnought is not the same as true sensation. They can see through optical sensors, but it is not quite sight. They can detect pressure and impact, but it is not quite touch. They exist in a state of profound sensory deprivation, their world filtered through mechanical intermediaries. Their experience of reality fundamentally altered from what they knew in life. And when they are not needed for battle, they are returned to stasis sleep, placed in the chapter's crypts to await the next time their skills are required. These periods of sleep can last for decades. For some ancient dreadnoughts, centuries pass between awakenings. Time becomes something fluid and strange, battles blurring together, memories of life before the interment fading like dreams upon waking. Some dreadnoughts, particularly among the Chaos Space Marines who lack the careful maintenance protocols of their loyalist brothers, succumb to madness from the isolation and sensory deprivation. They become hellbrutes, twisted things driven by rage and pain, kept in chains when not in battle because they cannot be trusted not to lash out at friend and foe alike. Even among the loyalist chapters, the psychological toll is immense. The oldest dreadnoughts speak of feeling distant from their brothers, of struggling to remember why they fight, of the weight of centuries pressing down upon whatever remains of their consciousness. They speak of the periods between awakenings as voids, as darkness so complete that when they wake, they sometimes wonder if they ever truly existed at all. The oldest currently serving dreadnought in the Imperium is Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves chapter. He fought during the Great Crusade over 10,000 years ago. He walked beside the Emperor himself and served under the Primarch Leman Russ. He was interred in his dreadnought chassis during the early years of the Imperium and has served faithfully ever since, waking periodically to lend his wisdom and his weapons to his chapter's wars. He is a living link to a past that most in the Imperium know only through myths and legends. He remembers things that have been forgotten, has witnessed events that shaped the galaxy. But even Bjorn, despite his strength of will and the care with which his brothers maintain his systems, feels the weight of those 10,000 years. Between awakenings, he dreams, though whether these are true dreams or merely the echoes of failing neural pathways is unclear. He wakes to find brothers he knew as young bloodclaws now dust in the crypts, generations having passed while he slumbered. He struggles to hold on to memories of his time in flesh, finding them slipping away like water through fingers, the mechanical aspects of his existence slowly eroding what little remains of the man he once was. 10,000 years. It is a span of time almost impossible for a mortal human to comprehend. It is longer than all of recorded human history before the Age of Strife. It encompasses the entire history of the Imperium, from its founding to the present day, and for a dreadnought to sleep for such a span, to lie dormant and forgotten for all those millennia. The mind that wakes from such a sleep, if it wakes at all, would be something transformed in ways both profound and terrible. To truly understand what 10,000 years of sleep means for a being like a dreadnought, we must consider what happens during stasis. Unlike the Necrons, whose consciousness is stored in quantum matrices that can be perfectly suspended without degradation, a dreadnought's occupant remains biological at their core. Even in the deepest hibernation, even with metabolic processes slowed to near immobility, there is still activity. Neurons still fire, however slowly. Synapses still connect and disconnect. The organic brain continues its work, though stretched across time in ways that transform its nature. In normal stasis sleep between battles, the periods are measured in years or decades. The occupant's mind drifts in a state that is not quite unconscious, but not truly aware either. Some dreadnoughts report experiencing what might be called dreams, though whether these are genuine dreams or merely the brain's attempt to process the sensory void is unclear. Others describe the sleep as a darkness so complete that awakening feels like being born anew, with no sense of continuity from the last waking moment. But 10,000 years is different. 10,000 years is beyond any span that the systems were designed to handle. The stasis field that maintains life was never meant to operate for such a duration. Components age, degrade, lose efficiency. And even with the field functioning perfectly, even with every system operating at peak capacity, the sheer temporal weight of such a sleep would take its toll on any consciousness. Consider what happens to memory over such a span. The human brain, even the enhanced brain of a space marine, is not designed for perfect recall over millennia. Memories fade, blur, merge with other memories until truth and fiction become indistinguishable. The oldest memories, the ones from life before the interment, would be the first to go. The feel of sunlight on skin, the taste of food, the sound of a brother's laughter during a moment of peace. These sensory experiences, so foreign to existence in a dreadnought sarcophagus, would become abstract concepts rather than lived memories. Then would come the tactical memories. Battles fought, strategies employed, enemies faced. At first, these would be distinct, each campaign a separate entry in the vast catalogue of service. But as centuries passed into millennia, they would begin to blend. One orc warband looks much like another when you're firing from a dreadnought chassis. One traitor uprising follows patterns similar to the last. The specific details would erode, leaving only general categories. Fought greenskins here, purged heretics there, defended this world, attacked that fortress. Even the memories of brothers, those sacred bonds that define a space marine's existence, would fade. Faces would lose their distinctness. Names would slip away like water through fingers. The chaplain who presided over the interment becomes just the chaplain. The chapter master who led during those early campaigns becomes a chapter master. Individual identities merge into archetypes. Personal connections dissolve into general respect for rank and position. And through it all, through every slow erosion of self and memory, the core identity would persist. The knowledge of being Brother Ancient Theron of the Iron Hammers chapter, the understanding of duty to the Emperor, the commitment to serve regardless of cost. These fundamental aspects of identity, reinforced by training and gene seed and the very structure of Space Marine psychology, would endure even as everything else faded. They are the bedrock upon which the Dreadnaught's consciousness rests, the foundation that remains when all else has been stripped away. But even bedrock erodes given enough time, and 10,000 years is enough time for erosion to cut deep indeed. What wakes from such a sleep would still be Theron, in the sense that it possesses his name, his purpose, his basic identity. But whether it would still be the same being who entered that sleep, whether enough of the original consciousness remains to claim continuity of self, that is a question that may have no satisfactory answer. This is what the Necrons have found. The Dreadnought lies in what was once a battlefield, though the conflict that raged here has long since been erased by time. The ground above has been worn smooth by wind and rain. The bones of the dead have crumbled to dust. The wrecked vehicles have rusted away to nothing. Even the radiation from plasma weapons has long since decayed to safe levels. Only deep beneath the surface, where the Dreadnought fell into a crater and was subsequently buried by shifting earth, does any evidence of that ancient war remain. If one could have watched the site across those 10,000 years, it would have revealed the patient work of geological time. In the first decades after the battle, the crater was still visible, a scar on the landscape marked by debris and scorched earth. Rain filled it partially, creating a temporary lake that froze in winter and evaporated in summer. Vegetation began to reclaim the edges. Hardy plants adapted to disturbed soil, spreading their roots into the contaminated earth. Centuries passed. The plants died and decomposed, adding organic matter to the soil. New species took their place, each generation advancing a little further into the crater. Sediment washed down from higher ground during spring floods, accumulating in layers that would tell a story to any geologist capable of reading them. The crater filled slowly, imperceptibly, at rates measured in millimeters per year. Small animals made burrows in the new soil. Their tunnels collapsed and were replaced by new tunnels, each contributing to the mixing and settling of the earth. Trees grew, their roots reaching deep, breaking apart the rocky substrate and creating channels that would eventually fill with more soil. The forest that emerged had no memory of the battlefield beneath it. To the birds that nested in its canopy and the deer that grazed in its clearings, this was simply another part of the endless wilderness that covered the continent. More centuries. The climate shifted. An ice age descended on the region, the advancing glaciers scraping away the topsoil, but somehow missing the crater, which had become a depression deep enough to escape the worst of the ice's grinding passage. When the glaciers retreated, they left behind new layers of till and erratic boulders, further disguising what lay beneath. The landscape had been transformed. Where once there had been plains suitable for tank warfare, now there were rolling hills and scattered lakes, the geography reshaped by the ice's inexorable pressure. Millennia accumulated, like the sediment. The planet's axial tilt changed slightly, altering the seasonal patterns. The continents drifted on tectonic currents, moving the site incrementally toward a new location relative to the equator. The star that gave the world light aged, its output changing in ways too subtle for short-lived creatures to notice, but significant over astronomical timescales. New species evolved in the oceans and on the land, filling niches left empty by the sterilization that had accompanied the ancient war. Through all of this, the Dreadnought remained. Its sarcophagus, designed to withstand the punishment of planetary bombardment, held against the gentler but more persistent assault of time. The ceramite didn't rust or corrode in the oxygen-rich atmosphere. The seals designed to keep out biological and chemical weapons easily resisted the infiltration of water and soil. The internal power source continued its work with the reliability of atomic processes, maintaining the stasis field that kept its occupants suspended between life and death. But no system is perfect, and no machine is eternal. Microfractures developed in components stressed beyond their design parameters. Radiation slowly degraded circuit pathways. The living metal that the Necrons use can repair itself indefinitely, but Imperial technology has no such capability. Each century of operation brought the system closer to critical failure, the margins of safety narrowing with patient inevitability. The emergency protocols that had activated when the Dreadnought first entered this emergency hibernation continued their work. They rationed power with exquisite precision, calculating optimal distributions between life support, stasis maintenance, and diagnostic monitoring. They initiated repairs when possible, rerouting around failures when it was not. They maintained constant vigilance, waiting for a retrieval signal that never came, ready to reactivate combat systems at the first sign of threat. But no threat came, unless time itself could be considered a threat. No enemies stumbled upon the burial site. No scavengers detected the faint energy signature and came seeking salvage. The world remained empty of intelligent life, its small populations of evolved creatures lacking the technology to recognize what slumbered in their midst. Even when ships passed through the system, their cursory scans detecting nothing of interest. They moved on without deeper investigation. The planet was catalogued as dead, sterile, valueless, not worth the resources required for colonization or exploitation. So the Dreadnought slept, and slept, and slept. Days became weeks, became months, became years, became decades, became centuries, became millennia. Above ground, ice ages came and went. The planet's orbit shifted slightly, lengthening its years. New species evolved in the oceans that had been sterilized by the war, life rebuilding itself with patient inevitability. The stars in the night sky slowly changed their positions. The very continents drifted on tectonic currents, reshaping the world's geography. If the marine within still possessed any awareness during this time, and that is a very large if, it would have been awareness of the most minimal kind. The stasis field reduces biological processes to near standstill, stretching a single heartbeat across hours or days. Thought, if it can be called that at such reduced speeds, would occur at rates incomprehensible to normal consciousness. One synapse firing might take weeks to complete, the resultant thought fragmentary and incomplete. It would not be sleep, not exactly, not dreams, not true unconsciousness, but something else entirely. A state of existence so attenuated that it barely qualifies as existing at all. And yet, even in that profoundly reduced state, something persisted. Some core of self, some fundamental awareness that maintained continuity across the vast gulfs of time. Whether this was the marine's conscious will, fighting to maintain identity despite everything, or simply the result of the neural preservation systems doing their work, is impossible to say. But when the awakening finally came, when the cryptek's interventions began reversing the stasis protocols, there was still something there to wake. Diminished, perhaps, transformed, certainly, but present nonetheless. And through it all, the Dreadnought remained, suspended in that space between life and death, its occupant's consciousness reduced to the barest flicker, a dream so deep and so long that even dreams became impossible. Until now, the cryptek that oversees the awakening of this section of the tomb world has a name, though it would be unpronounceable to human vocal cords and meaningless when translated. In the simplified battle cant that other species might understand, it might be rendered as something like observer of distant chronologies or he who measures the fall of stars. But names are strange things for the Necrons. They are not the beings they once were, and many of them struggle with the concept of individual identity in the same way other species understand it. This cryptek is a chronomancer, one who has mastered the manipulation of temporal fields and the measurement of time's passage. For millions of years before the Great Sleep, it studied the nature of time itself, learning to slow it, accelerate it, loop it back upon itself in localized fields. It remembers, though the memories are distant and cold, a time when such study was driven by curiosity and wonder. Now it pursues its craft simply because it is what it does, what it has always done, what it will always do, and purpose without passion, function without feeling. But when the tomb's sensors relay information about the anomaly, something like curiosity, or perhaps merely its echo, stirs in the cryptek's consciousness. Foreign technology operating on principles the automated systems do not recognize. Life signs, faint but persistent, of a type that should not be possible. A being preserved in stasis for a duration that the dating systems measure at approximately 10,000 years. The cryptek orders a full excavation. Canoptek wraiths phase through the soil above the Dreadnought, their dimensional destabilization matrices allowing them to analyze the composition of the burial material without displacing it. Scarabs swarm the site, beginning the delicate work of removing the overburden while simultaneously scanning every micron of the artifact they're uncovering. Tomb spiders, multi-limbed constructs the size of small tanks, position themselves around the perimeter, ready to assist with heavier lifting when required. The excavation takes hours by human reckoning, though to the Necrons it is merely another brief task in an existence measured in eons. Layer by layer, the Dreadnought is revealed. First, the top of the sarcophagus, its surface scarred by weapons fire that was ancient when the tomb world first sealed itself. Then the arms, one ending in a massive power fist, the other in what appears to be a multi-barreled weapon of some kind. Then the legs, each as thick as a tree trunk, designed to carry the massive weight of the machine across any terrain. When the excavation is complete, the cryptek itself descends to examine the find. Its form is humanoid in the way that all Necron nobility retain a vaguely human shape, but there is nothing human about it. The necrodermis that forms its body is worked with intricate designs and symbols, marking its rank and specialization. Its optical sensors glow with the characteristic emerald light of Necron technology as it circles the Dreadnought, examining it from every angle, extending sensor probes that can analyze materials at the molecular level. The analysis reveals much. The outer shell is ceramite, a material known from encounters with the space marines of the Imperium, incredibly durable, capable of withstanding tremendous impacts and extreme temperatures, but ultimately primitive compared to living metal. The power systems are fusion-based, crude but functional. The weapons are equally unsophisticated, relying on brute force rather than elegant manipulation of fundamental forces. But it is the sarcophagus that captures the cryptek's attention, for within it, preserved in a stasis field that the cryptek recognizes as being philosophically similar, though technologically vastly inferior to Necron methods, is a being that still lives. Not in the way that the Necrons live, as consciousness encoded in quantum matrices suspended in necrodermis, but living in the true sense, with biological processes ongoing however slowly, with a heartbeat measured in minutes rather than seconds, with synapses firing at a rate reduced to near immobility, but still firing nonetheless. The cryptek probes deeper, analyzing the life support systems with the kind of attention that a scholar might give to a particularly interesting historical text. It notes the redundancies, the fail-safes, the sheer obsessive over-engineering that has kept this being alive for 10 millennia. It is, in its way, impressive. Primitive and wasteful, yes, but impressive nonetheless. And then the cryptek makes a discovery that gives it pause, insofar as such a being can be said to pause. The stasis field is failing, not catastrophically, not yet, but the degradation is unmistakable. Power reserves that were meant to last centuries have been stretched across millennia. Components designed to function for the lifetime of a chapter have been operating for longer than most chapters have existed. The cascade failure hasn't begun yet, but it will. Soon, by the standards of beings who measure time in millions of years. Perhaps within decades, certainly within centuries. The being within the sarcophagus is going to die. For most Necrons, this would be meaningless. The death of an individual of a lesser species, a primitive creature barely above the level of beasts, would warrant no more consideration than a human might give to the death of an insect. But the cryptek is different, or at least, it remembers being different. It studies time, and time has a way of providing perspective. This being has survived for 10,000 years through nothing but the quality of its technology and the strength of its will. That is worthy of note, at the very least. More than that, the cryptek recognizes in this Dreadnought something that resonates with its own existence. Here is another being that has chosen, or been forced to choose, to surrender its flesh for a mechanical form. Another consciousness suspended between life and death, neither truly one nor the other. Another warrior who has outlived their species' normal span by such a degree that the world they knew is gone, replaced by something unrecognizable. The Necrons and the Dreadnoughts, the cryptek realizes, are not so different. Both are the dead who yet live. Both are warriors preserved beyond their natural span. Both exist in a state of undeath, their consciousness bound to mechanical forms that will endure far beyond the natural limits of flesh. The primary difference, the cryptek notes, with something that might have once been called irony, is that the Necrons did this to themselves willingly, while the space marine in the Dreadnought likely had no choice. They were dying, and their chapter offered them this rather than let them truly die. They said yes to continued existence, not knowing, or perhaps knowing all too well what that existence would entail. The cryptek considers its options. It could simply destroy the Dreadnought. The protocols are clear on this point. Alien technology discovered within the tomb's sphere of influence is to be analyzed and then eliminated to prevent contamination. One command to the Canoptech constructs, and the Dreadnought would be reduced to its component atoms, scattered to the winds, no longer a concern. But the Cryptech does not give that command. Not yet. Instead, it reaches out through the tomb's communication network, connecting to the consciousness of the tomb world's ruler. This is a Necron lord, a being of considerable power and authority, who has successfully navigated the perils of awakening with most of its intellect intact. The Cryptech presents its findings and waits for judgment. The exchange that follows is not conversation as most beings would understand it. It is the transfer of vast amounts of data, compressed and encoded, concepts and observations shared at speeds that make thought itself seem slow. The Lord examines the Cryptech's analysis, reviews the scans of the Dreadnought, considers the implications. Then it asks a question. Can the being within be awakened? The Cryptech runs calculations, models scenarios, examines the probability matrices. Theoretically, yes. The stasis field could be suspended. The life support systems could be stimulated to full function. The neural linkages between the occupant and the Dreadnought systems could be reactivated. Whether the consciousness within would survive such a revival after such a long dormancy is less certain, but the Cryptech estimates the probability at acceptable levels. The Lord considers this information. Then it makes a decision that surprises even the Cryptech, though surprise is a muted thing for beings such as they have become. Wake it, the Lord commands. I would speak with this ancient warrior. I would know what drives a being to accept such an existence. I would understand how the younger races view immortality and the price they are willing to pay for it. And so the Cryptech sets to work. The process is delicate, requiring a precision that even Necron technology must work to achieve. The stasis field cannot simply be switched off. Doing so would be like plunging someone from deep freeze into a furnace. Instead, it must be carefully, gradually reduced. The life support systems must be coaxed back to full functionality, sensors monitoring every vital sign to ensure that the biological components are responding appropriately. Neural stimulators must fire in carefully calculated patterns, preparing the dormant mind for the return to consciousness. The Cryptech works with tools that can manipulate matter at the atomic level, making adjustments to the Dreadnought systems that its original creators could never have imagined. It stabilizes failing components, reroutes power around degraded circuits, and bypasses damaged neural pathways. It does not repair the damage entirely. That would require resources and time. It does not wish to expend on this curiosity, but it does enough to ensure that the awakening will not immediately result in death. Hours pass, then days. The process cannot be rushed, not if the goal is successful revival, rather than merely triggering a brief flutter of consciousness before final systems failure. The Cryptech maintains its vigil, monitoring, adjusting, waiting with the infinite patience of a being that has existed for millions of years and expects to exist for millions more. Other Necrons gather to observe. Warriors, their minds so diminished that they can barely be called conscious, stand in silent ranks. Immortals, retaining slightly more of their original personalities, watch with what might be called interest if they were still capable of such emotions. Even a handful of other Cryptechs and members of the Lord's court arrive to witness this unusual proceeding. And then, on what would have been the seventh day by human reckoning, something changes. The life signs within the sarcophagus spike. The heartbeat, which had been maintaining a pace so slow it barely qualified as living, suddenly accelerates towards something approaching normal. Neural activity increases dramatically. The Dreadnought's power systems, dormant for so long, begin to surge. The Cryptech takes a step back, sensor arrays focused intently on the awakening machine. Around it, the other Necrons shift their stances slightly, weapon systems priming, ready for any eventuality. for this is still a warrior they are awakening. A being designed for combat, armed with weapons capable of threatening even Necron bodies. Within the Dreadnought, consciousness stirs. At first, there is only confusion, a sense of dislocation so profound it borders on existential terror. The mind waking knows that it should know where it is, who it is, what it is, but the answers to those questions are slow in coming. Memories float just out of reach, fragmentary and unclear. Sensations filter through systems that seem both familiar and utterly alien. The first coherent thought, if it can be called thought in any meaningful sense, is of darkness. Not the darkness of closed eyes or unlit rooms, but something more fundamental. The darkness of non-existence, of the void between moments, of time stretched so thin that it becomes meaningless. This darkness has weight and texture, pressing in from all sides, and the emerging consciousness struggles against it like a drowning man fighting toward the surface. Then come the diagnostics. This is familiar ground, something the long-trained military mind can grasp onto even in this state of profound disorientation. Systems reporting status, power levels checked and noted, structural integrity assessed, weapon functionality verified. These are concrete things, measurable and understandable, and they provide an anchor point for awareness that is threatening to spin off into confused panic. Life support systems, operational but degraded, 73% efficiency, multiple redundant systems offline, primary organs stable, waste filtration marginally functional, oxygen mix slightly off optimal but within acceptable parameters. Mobility systems, severely compromised, left leg, actuator frozen, right arm power relay operating at 18%, gyroscopic stabilizers showing drift, locomotion possible but will require extensive compensation, weapon systems, assault cannon ammunition depleted, power fist field generator showing fluctuations, targeting matrix cycling slowly, combat effectiveness estimated at 20 to 30% of optimal, power systems, critical, reserve power at 9%, primary core operating beyond designed lifespan, stasis field maintenance consuming 70% of available power, emergency protocols active, imminent shutdown, likely within standard weeks. The information flows in, processed by military instincts honed over centuries of warfare. And with each datum, with each status report, awareness grows more centered, more coherent. This is a Dreadnought. This is my body, or what serves as body now. These systems are mine to command, assuming they still respond to neural impulses after so long dormant. Then, gradually, awareness begins to coalesce on a deeper level. Questions form, pushing through the fog of awakening. Where am I? How did I get here? How long have I been unconscious? These are not questions the diagnostics can answer, and so the mind begins reaching into memory, searching for context, for explanation, for some framework to make sense of present circumstance. The last clear memory is of battle, of enemies pressing from all sides, of damage warnings cascading across displays, of the decision to enter emergency stasis rather than risk total systems failure. That much is clear and solid, anchored by the intense emotions that accompany combat, the feeling of being overwhelmed, of fighting a losing battle, of making the final choice to hibernate rather than die uselessly. These memories have emotional weight that has survived the long sleep. But when was that battle? The question brings with it an attempt to access the chronometer, to check time elapsed since the last conscious moment. And that is when the first true shock comes, hitting with force sufficient to disrupt the gradually stabilizing thought processes. 10,000 years. The number appears in the mind's eye, clear and undeniable, and for a moment there is nothing but rejection. That cannot be right. That cannot possibly be right. 10,000 years is not a span of time that can be slept through. 10,000 years is not a period that any system could maintain stasis. 10,000 years is impossible, absurd, wrong. But the diagnostics do not lie. The power core's decay rate confirms it. The degradation of components matches it. Even the simple mathematics of power consumption versus remaining reserves supports it. 10,000 years, give or take a few centuries in either direction. An entire age of the Imperium lived and ended while consciousness slumbered in this buried sarcophagus. The realization brings with it a cascade of secondary shocks, each one hitting before the previous has been fully processed. 10,000 years asleep means 10,000 years of the Imperium's history have passed unseen. Crusades fought, worlds won and lost, brothers born and died and passed into legend. The very chapter that the Marine served might not even exist anymore. Chapters rise and fall, are destroyed by enemies or absorbed by necessity, or simply fade from the records as bureaucratic errors compound over millennia. And the war, the battle that had been raging, the enemies that had seemed so immediate and pressing, the cause for which the decision to enter stasis had been made. All of that is ancient history now. That war ended. One side won, one side lost. Or perhaps it simply ground down to nothing, as wars sometimes do. The specific details, the reasons and purposes and goals, all have become meaningless with the passage of so much time. Everyone is gone. This realization comes with particular force. Every brother who fought in that final battle is gone. Every chaplain who might have known the Marine before interment. Every tech Marine who maintained the Dreadnought systems. Every chapter master who gave orders and blessing. Every scout who looked up to the ancients with awe, all of them dust in crypts, if remembered at all. The Marine has outlived not just comrades, but entire generations, entire centuries of service and sacrifice. The names come next, bubbling up from memory with painful clarity. Brother Sergeant Maximus, who had led the tactical squad with such precision. Chaplain Mordus, who had spoken the words over the interment ceremony. Tech Marine Varius, who had maintained the Dreadnought systems with such meticulous care. They had been alive, vital, real. Now they are less than memory, for even memory fades when given enough time. They are abstractions, names attached to impressions that might be more invention than truth. And with the names comes grief, not the sharp grief of fresh loss, but something deeper and more terrible. The grief of isolation spanning eons, of being the only one left who remembers, of carrying forward alone when all companions have fallen away. It is the grief of the survivor who has survived too much, who has outlived not just their fellows, but their entire context of existence. The despair that follows this realization is profound and crushing. It threatens to overwhelm the fragile coherence that consciousness has managed to achieve. What is the point of waking? What purpose could possibly justify continuation when everything that gave that continuation meaning is gone? The Emperor still exists, presumably, though even that is not certain after so much time. But the specific cause, the particular duty, the personal bonds that had motivated service, all of that is gone, erased by time as surely as if it had never existed. But then, as the despair threatens to become total, as shutdown and final rest begin to seem like merciful alternatives, something else stirs in the depths of that ancient mind. It is not hope, exactly. It is something harder, more fundamental. It is the core identity that has persisted across all those millennia, the bedrock of self that even 10,000 years could not entirely erode. I am a space marine. I serve the Emperor of mankind. I continue until death releases me from service, and death has not yet come. These truths, burned into consciousness by training and gene seed, and the accumulated weight of centuries of service before the interment, remain solid when everything else has become uncertain. They provide a foundation, minimal but sufficient, upon which awareness can rebuild, and so the despair is acknowledged, processed, filed away. There will be time to feel it properly later, or there will not. Either way, present circumstances demand attention. The luxury of surrender to grief is not one afforded to warriors, and whatever else has changed, this much remains true. The Marine in the Dreadnought is still a warrior, still bound by the codes and expectations that define such existence. Awareness expands outward, sensory data flooding in through optical sensors and Auspex arrays. And immediately, something is wrong. The readings make no sense. The electromagnetic signatures are wrong. The visual data is being processed through filters that identify materials and technologies utterly foreign to any Imperial standard. And the beings standing in a circle around the Dreadnought. Recognition comes with a spike of combat stimulants through dying biological systems. These are Necrons, ancient enemies, Xenos, whose very existence is an abomination, who threaten the galaxy with their awakening, who must be destroyed wherever they are encountered. Weapons systems begin to power up. The assault cannon starts to rotate. The Power Fist's energy field flickers to life. Targeting matrices come online, acquiring locks on the closest threats. But before the first shot can be fired, before the combat that instinct and training demand can begin, something gives pause to the ancient warrior. Perhaps it is the realization that the weapon systems are operating at perhaps 20% efficiency, that the Dreadnought's body is so damaged and degraded that even if every shot hit, even if the Power Fist's field held, it would not be enough against this many enemies. Perhaps it is the recognition that if the Necrons wanted to destroy the Dreadnought, they would have done so while it slept, not awakened it first. Or perhaps, after 10,000 years, after an existence measured in battles and wars and campaigns beyond counting, there is a certain weariness that stays the killing blow. A desire to understand what is happening before adding this to the list of conflicts that blur together in corrupted memory files. The weapon systems remain hot, but the triggers are not pulled. Not yet. And in that moment of hesitation, the cryptex steps forward and does something extraordinary. It speaks. Not in the harsh battle cant of Necron military communications, not in the dead language of the Necron Tyre, but in Gothic. The high Gothic of the Imperium, somewhat archaic in its construction but perfectly understandable. Be at ease, ancient warrior. We mean you no immediate harm. I am the one who called you back from your long sleep. I would speak with you, if you are willing, before decisions are made about your fate. The voice comes through the Dreadnought's external audio receptors, and it is unlike any voice the Marine has heard in their long existence. It has the mechanical quality of Vox transmission, but beneath that is something else. An emptiness, a flatness, as if the being speaking has forgotten how voices are supposed to sound when actual feeling is involved. For a long moment, there is no response. Inside the sarcophagus, the ancient Marine wrestles with a situation utterly outside the parameters of their experience. Necrons that speak Gothic. Necrons that revive Imperial warriors. Necrons that apparently want to talk rather than fight. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, but is probably only a few seconds, the Dreadnought's own Vox systems crackle to life. The voice that emerges is rough, distorted by systems that have not been used in 10 millennia, but it carries weight and authority. I am Brother Ancient Theron of the Iron Hammers chapter, or I was, once. I know not what I am now, awakened in this time so far from my own. What manner of Xenos are you, that you speak our tongue? And what is your purpose in rousing me from my rest? The cryptex optical sensors brighten slightly, the Necron equivalent of a nod or acknowledgement. I am called Observer of Distant Chronologies, though that name means little to your kind. I study time and its effects, and I revived you because I found the manner of your preservation fascinating. You are a being that has chosen undeath over true death, who has surrendered flesh for metal, who exists in a state between living and dying. In this, we are not so different, you and I. a harsh sound that might be laughter, or might be a malfunction in the Vox systems, emerges from the Dreadnought. Not so different? You are Xenos, alien, enemy. I am a servant of the Emperor of mankind, humanity's bulwark against the darkness. We have nothing in common. Do we not? The cryptek gestures at itself, at its necrodermis body. I was once flesh and blood, as you were. I lived, aged, would have died in my span. But I was given the choice, or what I thought was a choice, to transfer my consciousness into this form you see before you, to become immortal, eternal, undying. I said yes to that offer, though I did not fully understand the price until it was too late to reconsider. The cryptek pauses, and when it continues, there is something in its voice that might be the ghost of ancient sorrow. We lost our souls in the bargain, not in the superstitious sense that your Imperium understands souls, but in the sense that we lost our capacity to truly feel, to truly be. We are echoes of what we were, shadows cast by beings who no longer exist. We persist, yes. We function, we think after a fashion, we act, but we do not live, not truly. There is silence from the Dreadnought. Then, and you think this is the same as my existence? I chose this. I chose to continue serving my Emperor and my chapter rather than accept the peace of death. I am still human, still myself, still capable of feeling, of caring, of... The words trail off. For the truth is more complicated than that, and the ancient Marine knows it. The decades, the centuries, the now millennia spent in the Dreadnought have taken their toll. Memories of life before the interment are faded, distant, more like history read in a book than lived experiences. The capacity to feel remains, yes, but it is muted, filtered through the mechanical existence. And between the long sleeps, so much is lost, so much is forgotten, so much of what made Brother Ancient Theron a person rather than just a weapon has been eroded by time and circumstance. The cryptek seems to sense this hesitation, this uncertainty. You doubt. Good. Doubt is closer to truth than certainty, in my experience. And the truth, Ancient One, is that we are more alike than either of us might wish to admit. We are both the dead who yet live. We are both warriors who have outlived the ages we were born into. We are both preserved in metal shells, our original forms long gone, our consciousness tethered to mechanical existence by technologies that blur the line between life and death. The Necron pauses again, and this time when it speaks, the tone is different, less lecturing, more conversational, as if the cryptek itself is working through these thoughts for the first time in a very long while. I have existed for millions of your years, Ancient One. I remember, however dimly, a time before the biotransference. I remember the war in heaven, though those memories are fragmented and unclear. I remember the decision to sleep, and I remember waking to a galaxy utterly transformed. And in all that time, I have never encountered another being who might understand what this existence truly means. Oh, there are other Necrons, of course. Millions of us, billions perhaps, scattered across the tomb worlds. But most of them are barely conscious anymore. The lower ranks were given bodies with insufficient complexity to maintain full personality matrices. They are automatons wearing the faces of the dead. And even among the nobility, many have gone mad from the endless years, or have retreated so far into protocol and duty that they might as well be machines themselves. But you, the cryptek continues, and there is something approaching wonder in its voice. You are different. You have existed for merely 10,000 years, a blink of time by my standards, yet long enough to have tasted the same bitter fruit we have been consuming for eons. You know what it is to wake and find the world changed. You know what it is to lose pieces of yourself with each sleep. You know what it is to question whether the thing you have become can still be called by the name you once had. The Dreadnought's weapons have powered down, though the targeting systems remain active. This is too strange, too unexpected for immediate violence to be the answer. Why tell me this? Why wake me at all? You could have destroyed me in my sleep. You could destroy me now. I am in no condition to resist an army of your kind. What do you want from me? Xenos. Want? The cryptek seems to consider the question. I want what I have rarely found in millions of years of existence. I want conversation with another being who might understand. I want to compare our experiences, to see what insights might emerge from two very different approaches to the same fundamental question. How does one continue to exist when existence has lost much of its meaning? How does one retain identity when the self is fragmented and fading? How does one serve a purpose when the purpose itself has become abstract and distant? The Necron spreads its arms, a gesture that encompasses the tomb world around them. My lord commands me to wake you so that we might understand how your species views immortality. But I confess, my own interests are more personal. I wish to know if you have found answers that we have not. I wish to know if there is more to this existence than the cold fulfillment of ancient programming. I wish to know if, after 10,000 years, you still remember why you chose to continue. For a long moment, the Dreadnought is silent. Then slowly, the weapon systems power down completely. The targeting locks disengage. The assault cannon stops rotating. I remember, comes the response, and the voice is quieter now, less hostile, more thoughtful. I remember the battle where I fell. I remember the chaplain's words as they sealed me in this tomb. I remember thinking that this was better than letting my gene seed die with me, better than abandoning my brothers when there was still service I could give. I remember the choice, and I remember thinking it was the right one. A pause, then. Whether it was actually right, whether I would make the same choice knowing what I know now, that is a question I have tried not to ask myself too often. Because if the answer is no, if I would not choose this again, then what does that say about the millennia I have already spent in this form? What does it say about the centuries or millennia yet to come? That is the question, is it not? The cryptek moves closer, its movements precise and controlled. We Necrons made our choice with even less information than you had. We were told we would become immortal, powerful, eternal. We were not told we would become hollow. We were not told that we would lose the very things that made existence worth having. If we had known, would we have chosen differently? The cryptek tilts its head, a curiously human gesture from a decidedly inhuman being. Some say yes, some say no. Some say it is pointless to wonder, for the choice was made and cannot be unmade. We are what we are, and speculation about what we might have been serves no purpose. But you know what I think, after all these eons. I think the answer matters less than the asking. The fact that we can still ask these questions, that we can still contemplate our own existence and choices, means that something remains. We are diminished, yes, changed, certainly, but not yet entirely lost. The Dreadnought processes this. Systems running through scenarios, calculating implications, wrestling with concepts that military programming was never designed to handle. Finally, you speak of philosophy, of meaning, of self. But you are still Xenos, still enemy. The Imperium would demand I destroy you if I could, purge the alien wherever it is found. How can we have this conversation, this moment of apparent understanding, when our very natures put us in opposition? Because, the cryptek responds, at this scale, at this level of existence, such categories become less meaningful. You are human. I am Necron. These are facts. But they are not the only facts. We are also both beings who have existed far beyond our natural span. We are both warriors who have fought in more battles than we can properly remember. We are both consciousness trapped in mechanical forms, watching the ages roll past like waves upon a shore. The war between our peoples continues, yes. It will continue long after this conversation ends. You will return to your Imperium, if you can, and fight against Necron forces wherever you encounter them. And we will rise from our tomb worlds, and seek to reclaim the galaxy we once ruled. This is the nature of the cosmos, the great game that plays out across the stars. But here, now, in this moment, we are simply two ancient warriors comparing scars. And surely, even in a universe as hostile as this one, there can be space for such a moment. Surely even enemies can acknowledge each other as more than mere obstacles to be destroyed. The silence that follows is heavy with consideration. Around them, the other Necrons wait, motionless as statues, their limited minds unable to truly understand the exchange taking place, but programmed to defer to the cryptech's authority. Above, somewhere far above, the surface of the tomb world continues its slow awakening. Canoptech constructs, spreading across the landscape, establishing the first nodes of what will become a formidable defense network. Finally, the Dreadnought speaks again, and this time, there is something different in the tone. Not acceptance, not friendship, but perhaps respect, recognition. I have fought for 10,000 years. I have stood in the crucible of battles beyond counting. I have seen brothers fall and rise again. I have witnessed the death of worlds and the birth of new hopes from the ashes of the old. I have served the Emperor through ages of darkness and brief candles of light. And in all that time, in all those wars, I have never had a conversation like this one. I do not know what to make of you, Xenos. I do not know what to make of this moment. But I will acknowledge this much. You are not what I expected to find when I woke, and perhaps that alone is worth noting. In an existence where so much is exactly as expected, where patterns repeat until they blur into meaninglessness. The cryptech's optical sensors flicker in what might be approval. That is more than I dared hope for. Now then, let us speak of practical matters. Your systems are failing, Ancient One. The stasis field that preserved you is degraded beyond my ability to restore it fully. The power core that sustained you for 10 millennia will not sustain you for another. Even the biological components within your sarcophagus show signs of degradation that will, eventually, prove fatal. You are dying, brother Ancient Theron of the Iron Hammers. Not immediately, not even soon by the standards of your kind. But inevitably, unless something changes. The Dreadnought's diagnostics confirm what the cryptech is saying. The warnings have been there, in the peripheral awareness, since awakening. Systems are failing, backups are exhausted, degradation has passed certain critical thresholds, months perhaps, maybe a year or two if fortune favors, but not longer. The long sleep has extracted its final price. I knew, comes the response, surprising both the cryptech and perhaps the Marine itself. I knew before I entered stasis that the reserves were insufficient. I knew that this sleep would likely be final, but the alternative was to die there on that battlefield, to let the tech priests cannibalize my chassis for parts, to pass into final rest with nothing accomplished. This way, at least, there was a chance. A chance that my chapter would find me, a chance that I could serve once more, a chance that my ending would have meaning. And now you wake to find your chapter gone, your war concluded or forgotten, and your death approaching regardless. The cryptech states this as fact, not question. Was the chance worth it? Another long pause. Then, I do not know. Ask me again when the end finally comes. Perhaps I will have an answer by then. The cryptech nods, that strange gesture again. Fair enough. Which brings me to my proposal. I could attempt to preserve you, if you wished. Not as your chapter would have done, not with their primitive understanding of stasis technology, but with Necron science, with understanding of temporal manipulation that your kind cannot match. I could slow your degradation to near immobility, stretch those final months into decades, perhaps centuries. You would have time to find your chapter, if they still exist. Time to fight once more, if you choose. Time to accomplish whatever it is you feel you must accomplish before the end. The offer hangs in the air between them, laden with implications. To accept help from Xenos, from the ancient enemy, would be heresy by any imperial standard. And yet, the alternative is death. Not the honorable death in battle that every space marine trains for, but the slow system's failure in a forgotten tomb, consciousness flickering out like a candle in the wind. Why? The Dreadnought asks. Why would you do this? What do you gain from my survival? What do I gain? The cryptek seems to consider this question seriously. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps the satisfaction of having preserved something unique, something that deserves to continue. Or perhaps I simply wish to see what you do with the time I give you. How an ancient warrior who has already accepted one form of undeath will face the approach of true death. Whether you will rage against it, or embrace it, or simply continue serving, because that is all you know how to do. Or perhaps, and here the cryptek's voice drops to something that might almost be called gentle, I do it because in millions of years of existence, it has been so very long since I had the opportunity to help rather than destroy, to preserve rather than eliminate, to act in a way that aligns with what I think I might have valued once, before I became what I am now. The Dreadnought's sensors focus intently on the cryptek, searching for deception, for hidden motives, for the trap that surely must be present in such an offer. But the readings are inconclusive. The cryptek is alien, its thoughts and motivations ultimately unknowable to human or space marine understanding. It could be telling the truth. It could be lying. It could be operating from motivations so foreign that truth and lie are meaningless categories. And if I refuse, if I choose to die as I am, without your intervention, then I will respect that choice, the cryptek responds immediately. I will ensure that your final days are as comfortable as your condition allows. I will provide power to sustain your systems until the biological components fail completely. And when the end comes, I will ensure that your body is treated with the respect due to a warrior of your stature, returned to your Imperium if possible, or interred here with full honors if not. You would do this? Show such honor to an enemy? Enemy? The cryptek's voice carries something that might be amusement, though it's hard to tell through the mechanical flatness. You are no threat to me, Ancient One. Your weapons could not harm my form. Your chapter is gone. Your very presence here is accident rather than aggression. What enmity should I hold against you? You are simply another being trapped in a cruel existence, trying to find meaning in the service of powers that may or may not care whether you survive. In that, we are kin of a sort, regardless of species. There is a long pause as the Dreadnought processes this response. Then carefully, measured words emerge from the Vox speakers. You speak as though you understand what it means to serve without certainty of purpose. But you Necrons, you ruled the galaxy once. You fought the war in heaven and won. What uncertainty could you possibly know? The cryptek's optical sensors dim slightly, and when it speaks again, there is something in its voice that might be called sadness, or the distant echo of sadness. Won? Is that what you think we did? Ancient One, let me tell you what victory in the war in heaven meant for my people. We destroyed the old ones, yes. We shattered the Citan who had given us these forms. We stood triumphant over a galaxy in ruins, with power enough to reshape stars and extinguish suns at our will. And in doing so, we lost everything that made victory meaningful. We became hollow things, shadows of what we had been, capable of conquest, but incapable of enjoying what we had conquered. Our great empire, the civilization that spanned the galaxy at its height, was built on the foundation of our own extinction. We had killed ourselves in the process of making ourselves immortal. The beings who entered the biotransference furnaces were not the same beings who emerged. We were changed, fundamentally and irreversibly, into something less than we had been, even as we became more in terms of raw power. The cryptek pauses, seeming to gather its thoughts, though such a being processes information at speeds that make human thought seem glacial. And then, recognizing that we had destroyed not just our enemies but ourselves, we chose to sleep. We retreated into these tomb worlds and surrendered to dormancy, hoping that when we woke the galaxy would be ready for us to rule it properly. But what we did not understand, what we could not have understood, was that sleep would not heal what biotransference had broken. I have been awake now for, I calculate it at approximately 200 years of your reckoning, though time becomes strange when one exists as I do. In that span, I have studied the peoples who now inhabit the galaxy, humanity primarily, but also the Aeldari remnants, the Tau, the other species that have risen to fill the void we left. And do you know what I have learned? The Dreadnought's sensors focus intently on the cryptek, waiting. I have learned that none of them fight for the reasons we fought. Your Imperium battles for the survival of your species, for faith in your Emperor, for purposes that, however misguided, still possess emotional weight. The Aeldari fight to preserve the remnants of their civilization, driven by regret for their fall and hope for redemption. Even the Tyranids, mindless as they seem, are driven by the fundamental biological imperative to consume and reproduce. But we Necrons, we fight because it is what we have always done, because our programming compels us, because we lack the capacity to imagine doing anything else. We seek to reclaim the galaxy, not out of need or desire or true purpose, but because the plan was made millions of years ago, and we lack the will or means to deviate from it. The cryptek moves closer to the Dreadnought, its movements precise and deliberate. So when you ask if I understand service without certainty of purpose, know that I understand it better than you might think. Every action I take, every duty I fulfill, every order I follow, all of it is done without the emotional context that would make such actions meaningful. I serve because I was programmed to serve. I continue because I was designed to continue. And I question whether any of it matters because I am just barely capable of questioning. The Dreadnought is silent for a long moment, processing this confession from the ancient Xenos. Then slowly, it speaks. When I was first interred in this chassis, the chaplain told me that I would continue to serve the Emperor for as long as my body could be sustained. He spoke of it as an honor, as a gift, as proof that my service was valued enough to preserve beyond my natural span. And I believed him, because I had been trained to believe such things. But what he did not tell me, what perhaps he did not know or could not bring himself to say, was that such service comes with a price, that each period of stasis sleep would take something from me, that I would wake to find brothers I knew as youths, now dead of old age, that memories of my life before interment would fade, until they seemed like stories I had heard, rather than experiences I had lived. That the weight of centuries would press down upon me, until I sometimes wondered if the man I had been still existed in any meaningful sense, or if I had become merely an algorithm wearing his name. The Dreadnought's weapons, which have remained powered down throughout this exchange, shift slightly as servo motors adjust position. You speak of programming and compulsion, cryptek, but is what drives me truly so different. My gene seed was designed to make me loyal, to hardwire duty and service into my very biology. My training reinforced those imperatives until they became indistinguishable from my own desires. And now, in this form, with most of my original brain reduced to a preservation matrix connected to mechanical systems, how much of what I think and feel is truly mine, and how much is simply the Dreadnought's programming executing as designed? We are more alike than I would have thought possible, the cryptek observes. Both of us questioning the nature of our service, yet both of us continuing to serve nonetheless. Both of us aware of how we have been shaped and constrained by forces beyond our control, yet both of us lacking the means or will to rebel against those constraints. Perhaps this is the true nature of immortality, as the galaxy has allowed it to exist. Not freedom from death, but imprisonment within existence. Consciousness prolonged beyond the point where it retains the capacity for true choice. And yet, the Dreadnought counters, you chose to wake me rather than destroy me. You chose to help rather than harm. That suggests capacity for choice beyond mere programming, does it not? The cryptek tilts its head in that curiously human gesture. Perhaps. Or perhaps my programming is simply more subtle than I understand. Perhaps in designing these forms, the cryptechs of ancient times built in capacities we are only now discovering. Or perhaps, and here the mechanical voice takes on a quality that might almost be hope, perhaps we are both more than the sum of our constraints. Perhaps consciousness, even diminished and corrupted as ours have become, retains some irreducible quality that cannot be entirely predicted or controlled. I would like to believe that, the Dreadnought says quietly. I would like to think that when I choose to accept your help, when I decide to continue rather than surrender to system failure, that choice is truly mine, that it reflects will rather than merely programming, that I am still in some meaningful sense the person I once was. Then choose to believe it, the cryptech responds. In the absence of certainty, in the face of questions that may have no answers, we can at least choose what we believe about ourselves. It may be the only freedom that remains to beings such as we have become. The freedom to interpret our own existence, to assign meaning to our continuation. To believe that our choices matter, even if we cannot prove it. The weight of decision presses down upon the Dreadnought's consciousness. To accept would be to compromise everything the Imperium stands for, to consort with Xenos, to accept alien assistance in defiance of every doctrine. But to refuse would be to choose oblivion, to let the flame of service gutter out in this forgotten place, to waste the chance that the cryptech offers. I need time to consider this, the Dreadnought says finally. I need to process everything. The awakening, the years, the offer, all of it. This is not a decision to be made in haste. Time, the cryptech says, and there might be sadness in its voice, or the memory of sadness, is something we both have in abundance, for now at least. Take what you need. I will be here when you have decided. And so they settle into an unusual détente, the ancient Necron and the ancient Dreadnought, two beings from opposite ends of the galaxy's timeline, who have found themselves in unexpected communion. The other Necrons return to their duties, resuming the long work of awakening the tomb world. The Dreadnought remains in the excavation site, systems monitoring and maintaining, but not moving, consciousness turned inward in contemplation. Hours pass, then days. The cryptech returns periodically, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply standing in silent companionship. They discuss philosophy and war, memory and loss, duty and choice. They compare notes on battles fought across gulfs of time so vast that the wars they describe bear no relation to each other except in the abstract. They speak of brothers lost, of purposes questioned, of the weight that comes with existence extended far beyond its natural bounds. And slowly, something remarkable happens. Not friendship, that would be too strong a word, too human a concept for what develops between them. But understanding, perhaps, recognition, the acknowledgement that suffering and endurance are universal experiences, transcending species and circumstance. That the question of how to continue when everything has been lost is one that echoes across the ages, asked by every being that has survived when they should have died. On the seventh day, the Dreadnought makes its decision. I will accept your offer, Cryptech, not because I trust you, not because I believe there is no price to be paid, but because I have spent 10,000 years learning that survival sometimes requires choosing between options that all carry their own form of dishonor. And I would rather live and face whatever consequences come than die here, unremembered, having accomplished nothing with this final chance. The Cryptech bows its head in acknowledgement. Then let us begin. The process will not be pleasant, even for one with your resilience. I will need to interface directly with your systems to make modifications that your chapter's tech marines would consider heretical. But when it is done, you will have time. What you do with that time will be entirely your own choice. The work begins that same hour. The Cryptech, assisted by other specialists from its conclave, begins the delicate task of modifying the Dreadnought systems. They work with precision that borders on artistry, their understanding of time and stasis fields far exceeding anything the Imperium could achieve. Power flows are rerouted. Temporal fields are layered over critical systems. Aging processes are slowed to near immobility. It takes weeks of work, but when it is complete, the Dreadnought's diagnostics paint a very different picture than before. The failing systems are stabilized. The degradation has been arrested. The biological components within the sarcophagus, which had been approaching final shutdown, are now suspended in a state where their remaining lifespan is measured in centuries rather than months. "It is done," the cryptech announces. "You have your time, ancient warrior. Use it wisely." The Dreadnought tests its systems, feeling the difference immediately. The sluggishness is gone. The warning klaxons that had been chiming in peripheral awareness have fallen silent. The sense of impending shutdown has receded to something distant and manageable. It is not healing, not a return to anything approaching prime function, but it is reprieve. It is chance. "I do not know how to thank you," the Dreadnought says, and there is genuine uncertainty in the mechanical voice. "I do not even know if I should thank you. What you have done defies every teaching I have received. And yet, I am grateful. How does one express gratitude for heresy?" The cryptech makes that gesture that might be a shrug. "You express it by continuing, by taking the gift and using it for whatever purpose you deem worthy, by proving that my assessment was correct, that you were worth preserving. Whether that leads you to fight against my kind or alongside them or somewhere unexpected entirely, that is for you to discover." "One final question," the Dreadnought says. "How did you know I would accept? You began this work before I had given my answer. How could you be certain?" "I could not be certain," the cryptech admits. "But I have studied time for millions of years, Ancient One. And one thing I have learned is that those who have survived as long as you and I, who have endured when we should have died, who have continued when continuation seemed impossible, we do not give up. We do not surrender. We take every chance, accept every opportunity, grasp at every possibility of continued existence and purpose. It is what defines us, for good or ill. We are the ones who chose to go on. And we will continue choosing to go on until there are no more choices left to make." The Dreadnought considers this, parsing the truth in the cryptech's words, and realizes that the ancient Xenos is right. Given the choice between certain death and uncertain continuation, between ending here and fighting on a little longer, the choice was never really in doubt. It is the nature of what they both are: survivors, endurers, warriors who do not know how to stop fighting, even when every rational analysis says they should. "Then I suppose I should return to my Imperium," the Dreadnought says, "if I can find it again after so long." "I can help with that as well," the cryptech responds. "Our sensor networks are extensive, and we have already detected Imperial presence several systems away. I can provide you with coordinates. Perhaps even arrange transport to a location where you might signal for retrieval. Consider it part of the service rendered." "Why?" The question comes again, but this time with less suspicion, more genuine curiosity. "Why help me to this extent? What do you truly gain from this?" The cryptech is silent for a long moment, its optical sensors dimming slightly as it processes the question. When it speaks again, the voice is quieter, more contemplative. "Do you know what the worst part of this existence is, Ancient One? It is not the loss of feeling, not the isolation, not even the endless weight of years. It is the knowledge that we did this to ourselves, that we chose this, and in choosing, we destroyed not just our own future but any possibility of a different path. The war in heaven is long over. The old ones are gone. The Catan are shattered. The very reasons we became what we became have passed into history so ancient that even we have trouble remembering the details. And yet we persist, we endure, we continue along the path we set ourselves upon millions of years ago. We are trapped by our own choices, bound by decisions made before your species even existed. But you still have choices. You are not locked into a single path by technology that cannot be undone. You can choose your wars, your causes, your purposes. You can even choose to end, though I suspect you will not. And in helping you, in preserving your capacity for choice, perhaps I am vicariously experiencing the freedom we lost. Perhaps I am acting as I wish my own kind could act, making decisions based on present circumstance rather than ancient programming. The cryptek looks directly at the Dreadnought, optical sensors bright and focused. Or perhaps I am simply lonely, and you are the first being I have encountered in epochs who might understand what this existence truly means. Take your choice of explanations. They are all true in their way. The Dreadnought has no response to this. What can be said to such an admission? What words exist to bridge the gap between species, between experiences so similar yet so foreign? In the end, it settles for the simplest acknowledgement. I understand, cryptek, or I try to, and I will not forget what you have done here, even if I cannot fully explain it to my brothers should I find them again. That is all I ask, the cryptek responds. Now come. Let me show you to the surface. Your war awaits, ancient warrior, and I have my own duties to attend to in awakening this tomb world. Our paths diverge here, but perhaps, if the galaxy is kind, we may meet again in some future age. The journey to the surface is long, winding through corridors of living metal that shift and reconfigure as they pass. The Dreadnought walks with unsteady steps, systems still adjusting to the modifications the crypteks have made. But there is strength in the movements that was absent before. Purpose, direction. At the surface, a wasteland of grey stone stretches to the horizon, marked by the first stirrings of the tomb world's awakening. Monoliths rise in the distance, their forms flickering with emerald light. Canoptek constructs move across the landscape like mechanical insects, building and repairing and transforming. The cryptek provides coordinates, transmits data on Imperial movements detected by the tomb's long-range sensors, even provides power cells to ensure the Dreadnought can reach its destination. It is help beyond what was promised, beyond what could be expected. One last thing, the cryptek says as the Dreadnought prepares to depart. When you return to your kind, when they ask you what happened to you, what will you tell them? The Dreadnought considers this question. The truth would be impossible to explain, heretical in the extreme. A lie would be simpler, but somehow feels wrong after such an exchange. I will tell them I slept and woke and found the galaxy changed, the ancient marine finally says. I will tell them that I encountered Xenos, who, for reasons I do not fully understand, chose mercy over destruction. I will tell them that even in this dark age, there are moments that defy expectation and doctrine both, and if they believe me or think me mad from the long sleep, that is their choice to make. A fair answer, the cryptek acknowledges. Then go, brother ancient Theron of the Iron Hammers. Return to your Emperor's service. Fight your wars and fulfill your duty. And if our paths cross again in battle, know that I will show you no mercy there. This moment of peace exists outside the great game we play across the stars. Within it, we are enemies as we must be. I would expect nothing else, the Dreadnought responds, and I will face you without hesitation should we meet in war. But I will also remember this and wonder at it for whatever time I have remaining. With that, the ancient marine turns and begins the long march across the tomb world's surface, leaving the cryptek standing alone in the grey light of a dying sun. The Necron watches the Dreadnought's retreating form until it disappears over the horizon, then turns back to the tomb. There is work to be done, a world to awaken, an empire to rebuild. The duties of eternity call, as they always have and always will. But for just a moment, for the first time in millions of years, the cryptek allows itself to feel something approaching satisfaction. Not happiness, that is beyond its capacity now, but the sense that it has done something that mattered, something that was its choice rather than mere programming, something that might, in some small way, have meaning beyond the endless cycles of war and awakening. And as it descends back into the tomb's depths, the cryptek finds itself hoping, insofar as such a being can hope that the ancient warrior it saved will find what it seeks, will complete whatever purpose drives it, will make the time it has been given count for something. In the Warhammer 40,000 universe, such moments are rare. The galaxy is a cruel place, where compassion is weakness and mercy is often betrayal waiting to happen. Where ancient hatreds span millennia and wars are fought for reasons that have long since lost all meaning beyond the fighting itself. Where the very notion of peace is almost heretical and understanding between species is regarded with suspicion at best. But here, in this forgotten corner of the galaxy, on a tomb world just beginning its reawakening, two beings from opposite ends of the cosmic timeline found a moment of connection. Not friendship, not alliance, but acknowledgement. Recognition of shared experience, shared suffering, shared endurance in the face of existence that has long since ceased to offer anything but more existence. The Dreadnought continues its journey across the wasteland, systems compensating for the rough terrain, sensors scanning for threats. Somewhere ahead lies the Imperium, or what remains of it. Somewhere ahead is purpose, duty, the continuation of service that has defined this existence for so long. But now, layered over all of that, is the memory of this encounter. The knowledge that even in a universe as hostile as this one, moments of unexpected grace can occur. Inside the sarcophagus, the ancient marine's mind processes and reprocesses the experience. It will be difficult to explain, perhaps impossible. The Inquisition would have questions, so many questions, about collaboration with Xenos, about accepting alien assistance, about hours of conversation with an enemy of mankind. There will be suspicions and investigations and quite possibly worse, but that is a problem for later. For now, there is only the march. One heavy foot in front of the other, servo motors whining, gyroscopes compensating, systems operating at levels they have not achieved in thousands of years. The body may be ancient and scarred and patched with Xenos technology that no tech marine would approve, but it still functions. It still serves. It still carries its pilot forward into whatever future remains. And that, in the end, is what matters. Not the method of preservation, not the source of the reprieve, but the fact of continuation. The choice to go on, to serve, to exist for whatever time is granted. It is what both beings have in common, the Necron and the Dreadnought. They are the ones who continued when they could have stopped, who endured when they could have surrendered, who chose eternal service in all its forms over final rest. Back in the tomb, the cryptech returns to its duties with renewed focus. There are stasis crypts to open, systems to repair, warriors to awaken. The tomb world must be brought fully online, its defenses established, its armies mobilized. There are enemies to face, the Imperium among them, and a galaxy to reconquer. The great work continues, as it has for millions of years, as it will for millions more. But in the quiet moments, in the brief periods between tasks, when even a being such as this can pause to reflect, the cryptech will remember the ancient Dreadnought, will wonder how the warrior fares in its return to the Imperium, will contemplate whether the gift of time will be used wisely or wasted on battles that mean nothing in the grand scheme of eons. And perhaps, just perhaps, the cryptech will look at its own existence slightly differently, will question, if only for a moment, whether there might be more to this undeath than simply continuing, whether purpose might be found in unexpected places, whether even beings as old and cold as the Necrons might still be capable of change, however small. The galaxy turns on its axis, stars burning and dying, worlds born and destroyed, species rising to greatness only to fall into dust. The great wheel of time grinds onward with patient inevitability, and on that wheel, two ancient warriors, one Necron, one human, both something more and something less than either, have found a moment of understanding in a universe that offers precious few such moments. What becomes of the Dreadnought is unknown. Perhaps it finds its chapter, or their successors, and returns to service with a tale none will fully believe. Perhaps it falls in battle before reaching Imperial space, systems finally failing, mission incomplete. Perhaps it chooses a different path entirely, using its reprieve for purposes that defy the expectations of both Imperium and Xenos alike. What matters is the choice. What matters is that when faced with the end, when all seemed lost, a path forward was offered and accepted. And in that acceptance, in that choice to continue despite everything, there is a kind of victory. Not the victory of conquest or the triumph of battle, but something smaller and yet perhaps more meaningful. The victory of endurance, of persistence in the face of inevitable decay, of choosing to matter, even briefly, even in ways that defy doctrine and expectation. This is the truth that both beings have discovered, each in their own way. That immortality, whether achieved through Necron biotransference or space marine interment, is not the gift it appears to be. It is burden, curse, weight pressing down across years and centuries and millennia. It is the slow erosion of self, the gradual loss of everything that once made existence meaningful. It is duty without end, service without respite, continuation for its own sake, long after reason for continuation has faded. But it is also choice, the choice to persist, the choice to serve, the choice to find meaning in the moments between battles, in the connections made across impossible divides, in the simple act of continuing when stopping would be so much easier. And perhaps, in the end, that is enough. Perhaps the meaning is not in the destination, but in the journey. Not in the ultimate purpose, but in the continuing decision to have purpose. Not in achieving peace, but in choosing to fight on despite never finding it. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, two warriors have found something that transcends warfare. Not peace, that is too much to hope for, too foreign to what they have become. But understanding, acknowledgement, the recognition that suffering is universal, that the burden of immortality is shared across species and circumstance, that the question of how to continue echoes through the ages, regardless of whether it is asked by flesh, metal, or something in between. The Dreadnought walks on. The cryptek returns to its duties. The tomb world awakens. The Imperium endures. The wars continue, as they always have and always will. But in one forgotten corner of the galaxy, on one unremarkable tomb world, something happened that defied the usual patterns. Something that suggested that even in this most brutal of universes, there might be moments of grace hiding in the darkness. And that, perhaps, is the real miracle. Not that it happened, but that it could happen. That even beings as far removed from their original nature as the Necrons and the Dreadnoughts can still find common ground, can still choose to help rather than harm, to preserve rather than destroy, to acknowledge the other as something more than merely an enemy to be eliminated. It will not change the galaxy. It will not end the wars or heal the wounds or bring peace to a universe that knows no peace. But it will matter to those involved. It will be remembered for however long memory lasts for beings such as these. And perhaps, in some future age, when the cryptek and the Dreadnought have both passed into legend or oblivion, someone will wonder at this tale and find in it some small spark of hope. Hope that even in the darkest of times, even when all seems lost, even when existence has been reduced to mere survival and service, there can still be moments of connection, moments where the barriers between species and circumstance fall away, if only briefly, moments where understanding transcends doctrine, and enemies acknowledge each other as fellow travelers on the road of eternal service. This is the story of when Necrons found an ancient Dreadnought asleep for 10,000 years. It is a story of two forms of immortality meeting and recognizing themselves in each other. A story of choices made and burdens shared, and duties that extend far beyond natural spans. A story of warriors who have become so much more and so much less than they once were, but who persist nonetheless. And as the Dreadnought finally reaches the edge of the Tomb World's territory and begins transmitting distress signals toward detected Imperial vessels, as the Cryptek oversees the awakening of the first true armies from their stasis crypts, as the galaxy continues its endless turning, this story joins the countless other tales of the 41st millennium. Tales of horror and sacrifice, of duty and faith, of wars fought across stars for reasons both profound and utterly meaningless. But perhaps, just perhaps, this tale carries with it a truth that the others do not. That in choosing to continue, in accepting the burden of eternal service, beings become more than just weapons or tools or automatons. They become testaments to the enduring will to exist, to matter, to serve, even when all reasons for such service have faded into the mists of time. The Dreadnought and the Cryptek, the human and the Xenos, the ancient warrior and the timeless scholar. Two beings who should have been enemies, who by all doctrine and logic should have fought to mutual destruction, instead found a moment of peace in which to acknowledge their shared fate. And perhaps that is the greatest heresy of all, and the greatest truth. That understanding is possible, that mercy can exist, that even in a galaxy that offers only war, there can be brief pauses in the fighting where warriors rest and contemplate and recognize each other not as enemies, but as fellow sufferers in the long dark. If you found this journey through the darkness fascinating, if the tale of these ancient warriors and their unexpected communion has resonated with you, consider subscribing to Warhammer 40K. Like this video to support the channel and let the algorithm know that stories like this matter. Share it with others who appreciate the deeper philosophical questions hidden in the grim darkness of the far future. Because in the end, Warhammer 40,000 is not just about the battles and the bolters and the endless war. It is also about these moments, these questions, these explorations of what it means to continue when continuation seems impossible, what it means to serve when service has become the only reality you know, what it means to be immortal in a universe that makes immortality feel like the cruelest curse imaginable. The Dreadnought walks on toward an uncertain future. The Cryptek returns to duties as ancient as time itself. And we are left to wonder at this moment that defied all expectations, to contemplate what it means, and to carry its truth forward into whatever darkness awaits. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. Until next time, may you find your own moments of grace in the darkness, and may your service, whatever form it takes, bring you something approaching peace.